Judges call. 1 point. Match ends in a draw. No winner. Foul to me. Foul to each other.
14 episodes. That was the whole job. When Jason David Frank was booked as the Green Ranger, the original arrangement was 14 episodes and out. Tommy was written to be temporary. Rita builds him, Rita uses him, the Rangers break the spell, the powers run down, he goes. That's the design. He lasted until 1997. And in the middle of that, the actual Red Ranger, the one who'd led the team since day one, was written off a show he'd helped make the biggest thing on children's television. So here's the swap. What if the show had kept the one it was always going to lose, and lost the one it was always going to keep? Canon first, flat. Green with Evil is a 5-part arc. Rita takes a new kid in town who's fought Jason to a draw at a martial arts tournament, and she makes him hers with a power coin she'd stolen from Zordon. There's no consent in it. It's a total override. And then, she does something the show never really deals with again. She tells him who the Rangers are. All of them. By name. What follows is 4 episodes of the heroes losing. He ambushes the group and wins. He gets inside the command center, cuts Zordon off, and disables Alpha with a virus. He beats Jason in the Dark Dimension. He puts the Dragon Zord through the city. The Rangers' only clean win in that whole arc comes right at the end, when Jason knocks the Sword of Darkness out of his hand and destroys it. That's the arc. Then the green powers start failing. The green candle drains them once, and they come back. And then they run out for good in late 1994, in an episode called Green No More. The Dragon Zord is left in the sea. It's never summoned again on television. So Tommy's exit was already written, twice. Now the other half, and it happened in the same season, Jason, Zach, and Trini get written out together, in an episode called The Power Transfer. The powers move to 3 new teenagers through a ceremonial object called the Sword of Light. Rocky takes red, Adam takes black, Aisha takes yellow, and the handover is presented as a formality. The reason the show gives is a World Teen Peace Summit in Switzerland. It's never depicted, not once. No scene, no letter, no follow-up, no return trip. 3 of the 5 people the audience had watched every day simply go to a conference that the program never mentions again. And here's the detail that makes the whole thing stranger. The Sword of Light moves the powers cleanly, on screen, from one set of teenagers to another, which means the show establishes, in 1994, that Ranger powers are transferable whenever the production needs them to be. Every later crisis about losing your powers is happening in a program that already demonstrated you can just hand them over. And Tommy stays, the temporary one, the 14-episode booking. He gets new powers, he becomes the White Ranger, and the show hands him the leadership. Ground rules for this one, because it's a delicate subject. Facts get receipts, guesses get announced before I make them. And nobody, living or gone, gets a kicking on my watch. A video a day for a month is the project. And today's is the one that rewrites who leads.
Three names were announced today as the lucky students invited to attend the World Peace Summit in Switzerland.
Second register. This is the part that matters, and it's the part I want to get exactly right. So I'm going to be slow about it. The peace conference isn't a story. It's a patch over an employment dispute. Here's the receded shape of it, and only the receded shape. The early cast were non-union. They had no residuals, meaning no money at all when the episodes were repeated. And repeated, they very much were. The pay was roughly $600 a week for 12-hour days that regularly ran longer, with live action, voice work, and weekends on top. Austin St. John has said, in his own account, that he'd have earned more working a fast food window. He's also said he lived in his Jeep after leaving. 3 of the cast pushed for better terms on behalf of everybody. And that's where it ended for them. Now, admitted gap, and it's an important one. The accounts I can source do not agree on the last step. Some say they walked off mid-production. Others say they were let go. Nobody involved has put a single settled version on the public record, so I'm not going to pick one for you, and I'm not naming a single executive, because the record doesn't support naming anybody. What is not in dispute is the shape. They asked to be paid properly. They were not. They were gone. And one thing I want to say plainly before we go anywhere near the speculation. The 3 actors who replaced them did nothing wrong. They turned up, they took a job that was offered, and 2 of them ended up carrying the show for years. If you've spent 30 years quietly resenting Rocky, Adam, and Aisha, That's a grudge pointed at the wrong end of the building. So why did the temporary one become permanent? 2 reasons, and neither of them is a beautiful idea somebody had in the shower. The first is the audience. Green Ranger merchandise flew off the shelves, and the response to the character was enormous. A show that exists to sell toys does not retire its best-selling toy. That's not cynicism. That's just how the machine works. And I'd rather say it out loud than pretend otherwise. The second is footage, and it's the constraint that decides this whole video. Power Rangers is assembled from Japanese footage. Season 2 adapts Die Ranger, but the American show kept the Z-Ranger suits because the suits were too popular to drop. So Saban paid Toei to shoot brand new material of the old costumes fighting the new monsters. Season 3 does the same trick with Kaku Ranger. That matters here because it means the White Ranger isn't a story decision that happened to need a costume. There was a white suit in the Die Ranger footage, and the show built a character to fit it. Labeled Reading Mine, Tommy stayed because the merchandise said so and the footage allowed it. Jason went because a contract negotiation didn't go his way. Neither of those is a creative choice, and both of them shaped the next 30 years of this franchise. Hard line, right here. Nothing after this happened. From here on, it's me guessing out loud, and I'll keep flagging it, because I don't want a clip of this going round with somebody thinking I claimed it was real. One more thing before we cross, and I mean this. This is a what-if about a television program and the decisions a production made. It is not a what-if about anybody's life. Jason David Frank died in November 2022. And I'm not going to sit here imagining an alternate version of a real man's years. The character is fair game, the person isn't. Right. Here's the change. 1994. The Green Powers still fail, exactly as written, but this time the show lets Tommy go with them, because he was always meant to. And the pay dispute resolves. Jason stays. No White Ranger. No power transfer. The original Red Ranger leads the team into Season 3 and beyond. Guessing now, and I'm arguing it from the footage rather than making it up. Here's what people miss when they wish Tommy away. The white suit doesn't vanish. Toei shot it. It's sitting in the Die Ranger material whether the American show has a use for it or not. And Saban paid for that footage. So somebody wears it. My guess, and it's a guess, it's Jason, which is a genuinely strange thought, because that makes the Red Ranger the White Ranger, and it makes the leader upgrade rather than get replaced. In the real timeline, the leadership passes sideways from one person to another, and the show never quite recovers a settled chain of command afterwards. In this one, it just gets stronger. And there's a second-order effect I keep chewing on. Tommy's whole appeal is that he's the outsider who earns his place. Jason's appeal is the opposite. He's the one who is always there. Put the white suit on Jason, and the White Ranger stops being a redemption story and becomes a promotion. Labeled opinion, that's a worse story and a better team. I don't think you get both.
Congratulations, Power Rangers! You have passed through the portal of power and light. Go forth in the spirit of ninja!
Still guessing. Season 3 is where the real timeline starts wobbling, and a lot of that is because the show has spent a year and a half swapping people out and hoping nobody notices. In our version, the person who leads the Rangers to Ninjor, the person leading them when Rita wrecks the Zords, the person leading them through the Alien Rangers arc when the whole cast gets turned into children, is the same person who was leading them in the very first episode. My forecast, labeled, that arc plays substantially better. Not because Tommy was bad at it, because continuity is the thing the Zordon era never actually had. And this is the version where it does. And I'll flag the cost immediately, because it's real. The Alien Rangers arc works partly because the audience is watching a team that's already been broken and rebuilt twice. Losing that makes the stakes cleaner, and the show a bit less strange, and Power Rangers was always at its best when it was slightly strange. There's one more strand here I want to pull, because it changes the texture of the whole season. Season 3 is the year the show starts destroying its own equipment. Rita wrecks the Zords, the original power coins are damaged past repair, and the team has to go and find Ninjor to get new ones. That's a story about a team losing everything it has and rebuilding from nothing. In the real timeline, the person leading them through that is a man who'd already lost his powers once and got a second set, which is thematically neat, and I don't think anybody planned it. In our timeline, it's a man who's never lost anything. Guess labeled, that's a completely different scene. Jason walking into the Temple of Power isn't a man who knows what it's like to be powerless. He's the one who's always had it. finding out for the first time what it costs. I genuinely think that's the better version, and I'd watch it.
And I, Trey of Heart, embrace you, Jason of Earth, with the kindness and empathy that power holds.
Still guessing? And this is where the swap starts costing real money. Canon for a second, because the detail is the point. Zeo runs a mystery about the Gold Ranger across 7 episodes, from the Power of Gold at episode 27 to a Golden Homecoming at episode 34. Behind it is Trey of Triforia, who's one being with 3 personalities, split into 3 bodies after a run-in with a bounty hunter, and who can't use his own powers while he's in pieces, so he lends them out. Billy tries them first, and his body rejects them, because he'd absorbed negative energy in the command center blast. Then, they go to Jason. That's the comeback. The original Red Ranger walks back onto the show, in gold, 2 years after he was written off it. Now take away the departure. If Jason never left, there's no comeback to make. The single most emotionally loaded return in the Zordon era just evaporates, because you can't come home if you never went anywhere. Forecasts labeled the Gold Ranger arc still happens, because Trey and the gold suit are in the source footage. But it lands on somebody else, and it means almost nothing. It becomes a plot about a 6th member, instead of a plot about a man coming back.
The Gold Ranger power is leaving Jason.
And along with them, Jason's own vital life force.
And the real version has a sting in the tail that this timeline also loses. In the season finale, episode 50, Good as Gold, the gold powers are draining away and taking Jason's life force with them, because they were never intended for a human body. He hands them back to a reunited Trey. The comeback ends with him quietly poisoned by the job and giving it up. Labeled opinion, that's one of the best things this franchise ever wrote, and it only exists because he left in the first place. Still guessing, and this one's easy to forget about. There's a feature film in 1995. It made $66.4 million worldwide on a budget of about $15 million, which makes it comfortably the most successful thing this franchise ever put in cinemas. And the White Ranger is in it. By 1995, he's the face the show is being sold on. He's all over the merchandise, and he's the character a huge chunk of that audience is turning up for. In our timeline, he doesn't exist. So my forecast? The film still gets made, because the money was already moving, and a hit television series is a hit television series. But it's sold on a different face. If Jason's in white, that's the image. If nobody is, then it's a 5-Ranger film with the original team and no breakout, which is a much more ordinary thing to advertise. Admitted, and I'll be honest about the limits of this one. I don't know whether that changes the box office at all, in either direction. Nobody has ever published the kind of data that would tell you which face sold those tickets. I'm reasoning from who was on the merchandise, and merchandise is not a receipt.
I choose you to lead the team as a new Red Ranger.
Still guessing. In the real timeline, Turbo runs a 2-parter called Passing the Torch, episodes 18 and 19, which aired on the 10th and 11th of September, 1997. Demetria tells Tommy, Adam, Tanya, and Kat to find their own successors and step down. 4 new Rangers arrive at once. It's the biggest single cast change in franchise history, and it happens in one afternoon. Part 2 is the last episode with Jason David Frank, Johnny Young Bosch, Nakia Baris, and Catherine Sutherland in the opening titles. 4 names come out of the credits together. If you were watching live that week, that's the moment the show you grew up with stopped being the show that was on. In our timeline, the person handing over the leadership is Jason, which is, my guess, a much heavier scene, because he's been there since the first episode, and the audience has watched him do the job for 4 solid years. But here's the thing I can't call, and I'm not going to pretend I can. Does he even get that far? Admitted gap, stated plainly. The reason the original cast left in 1994 was money, and there was nothing on the record anywhere that tells me a resolved dispute would have held for another 3 years, or what the terms would have looked like, or whether he'd have wanted to stay. Anyone who tells you they know is inventing it. What I'd say is this. In the real world, he came back the moment the show asked him properly. Make of that what you like. I'm labeling it as a read, not a fact. Still guessing. And this is the expensive one. Tommy Oliver is the most recognizable character Power Rangers has ever produced, and it isn't close. Green, white, red in Zeo, red in Turbo, and then years later, a doctor in Dino Thunder mentoring a new team. Aside from one Red Ranger reunion, he isn't a regular again until that season, and when he comes back as the adult in the room. Take him out in 1994, and every one of those is gone. My forecast labeled, the franchise survives, because it survived losing everybody else. But it loses the thread that ties the eras together. Tommy is the reason a kid who started watching in 2003 has any connection at all to a show that started in 1993. He's the continuity in a franchise that deliberately threw continuity away every year. And there's a version of this where the loss is bigger than the character. The Green Ranger is the template. Evil Ranger turns good is a story this show has told again and again, in season after season, and it works every time because the first one worked. Deleted at 14 episodes, and I genuinely don't know whether anybody thinks to try it a second time. Guess, labeled. But I'd bet on it. And there's a quieter loss underneath the loud one. In Dino Thunder, he isn't the hero, he's the teacher. A former ranger who's grown up, become a science teacher, and now has to look after a group of kids doing the thing he used to do. That's the franchise's only real attempt at showing what happens to these people afterwards. And it lands because the audience had spent 10 years with him. Delete the character in 1994, and nobody has that history. You can write a mentor, obviously. You can't write a mentor the audience already loves, because that takes a decade, and you've just deleted the decade. Labeled opinion? That's the single hardest thing to replace on this entire ledger.
Mastodon! Pterodactyl! Triceratops! Saber-tooth tiger! Tyrannosaurus!
Now let me argue against my own video, because a what if that only points one way is a pitch, not an argument. The gains here are real, and they're not small. You get the original 5 together for years, instead of 18 months. That's the thing the audience has wanted since 1994, and never stopped wanting. And it's why the biggest videos anybody makes about this show are all about somebody coming back. You get a leader who never changes. No sideways handover, no ceremonial sword, no awkward season where the show pretends nobody's noticed. You get an ending for the Green Ranger that's actually an ending. In the real timeline, his powers fail, he gets new ones, and the failure stops meaning anything. In ours, the candle burns down, and that's that. The Dragonzord goes into the sea and stays there, and it's a tragedy instead of an inconvenience. And you get a show that didn't have to lie to its audience. No peace conference, no Switzerland, no 3 familiar faces disappearing into a summit that never gets mentioned again. Labeled opinion, and I feel it. That white one might be worth more than all the rest of it put together. The tally, then, every line is a guess argued from the footage record and the employment record. You gain the original Red Ranger for the whole run, an unbroken chain of command, a Green Ranger arc with a real ending, the 5 originals kept together, and a show that never has to invent a conference in Switzerland. You lose the White Ranger as a redemption story, the Gold Ranger comeback and everything it meant, the Evil Ranger turns good template that later seasons kept reaching for, the mentor who'd earned the right to be a mentor, and the single face that stitches 30 years of this franchise into one thing. And there's a line on the ledger nobody wants to write down, so I'll write it. The trade isn't fair. One side of it is a group of people who wanted to be paid properly for a hit show. The other side is a fictional character. Those two things aren't the same kind of thing at all. And any what if that pretends they are is dodging something. Labeled verdict, mine, and I'll admit my bias openly. I was a Tommy kid. Green suit, dragon dagger, the lot. And I still think this trade is close enough that I couldn't tell you which show I'd rather have grown up with, which is not the answer I expected to be typing. Here's what stays with me. Both of these things were decided by people who weren't thinking about stories at all. One man stayed because the toys sold and there was a spare suit in the Japanese footage. 3 people went because a pay negotiation ended badly, and somebody needed a line of dialogue about Switzerland by Friday. And out of that came a character who held a franchise together for 3 decades, and a departure that fans are still arguing about in the comments of videos made by people who weren't born when it aired. None of it was designed. All of it was consequence. And I think that's the honest lesson of every what if I make about this show. We talk about these seasons as if somebody sat down and authored them. Mostly nobody did. A suit existed, a budget didn't, a contract fell through, a shipment of Japanese footage arrived in February and had to be on air by autumn. The stories we love came out of that. Not despite it. Out of it. Which is either bleak or brilliant, depending on the day you're having. Today, I think it's brilliant. Comments, 2 questions, and be specific. 1, if the green powers run out in 1994, and that's genuinely the end of him, who wears the white suit? Give me a name and a reason. 2, straight swap, no hedging. The original 5 together for 4 more years, or Tommy Oliver's entire career? Pick one. There's a full video on the channel about the Green Ranger arc from Tommy's side, and one about what the peace conference actually was. Off you go. Right, that's the video. If you're new here, the deal on this channel is simple. Everything we say gets checked before it goes out. No invented drama, no cursed episode nonsense, no lying to you for a thumbnail. Just the stuff we actually grew up on, told properly, by someone who was there. We're doing 30 of these in 30 days at the minute, chasing 4,000 subscribers, and every single view counts more than you'd think. So if you've got a correction, or a memory from back then, put it in the comments. We read them. Half the ideas on this channel came from someone in there going, hang on, you missed one. And there's another video waiting on your screen right now. Go on then.